People today in India are living through extreme and deadly heat. Bengal and Bihar are still massive extraction zones. Quite frankly, I am tired of the gaslighting while the continent burns. No more polite British history. If you think that you studied British colonial history in school, but you have never heard the word saltpetre before, you have been failed by the education system. People probably already know that the British were in India for cotton, indigo, salt, silk, tea, opium, but a lot fewer people understand that what sent them to India specifically was saltpetre. Saltpetre is an old-timey name for potassium nitrate. This one chemical is so intrinsically important to understanding world history. This is not taught in schools. That omission does us all a serious disservice, and it's not a mistake. You need saltpetre to make gunpowder, or at least you definitely did in the 1600s. Early gunpowder was made of three ingredients: charcoal, sulfur, and saltpetre. The charcoal is the fuel, the sulfur is the fire lighter, and the saltpetre introduces oxygen, which makes it burn more violently, explode bigger. Saltpetre forms naturally where there is disgusting high moisture, high nitrogen stuff, basically. It can form naturally as this white crust in caves, soils, old walls, old cellars, places where there's a lot of animal waste or urine or rotting dead material. All living things need nitrogen to build proteins, new cells, and DNA. The problem is most of the world's nitrogen is locked up in nitrogen gas, which plants and animals cannot use. Life depends on processes that turn nitrogen into usable forms. Saltpetre is one usable form. Anywhere that waste is rotting and bacteria is eating that waste, nitrates are building up on the soil. People who wanted to make gunpowder faster realised that they could speed up this process. So in 1561, Queen Elizabeth I of England paid £300, which is roughly £100,000 today, to a German engineer for the secret of manufacturing saltpetre from urine and animal waste. The British textbooks say that this was done to fuel their war efforts against France, but the British say that about everything, so I don't really know. I know they wanted guns. So Elizabeth organised for saltpetre farms to be established across England. Saltpetre men were given a royal warrant to dig up cesspits. This is as gross as you think. They were going around the country looking for places where human excrement had already accumulated. So you and your family have been using this room as a toilet for a while. The saltpetre men would come and kick you out of your house and then dig up your floor to get at your old shit so that they could turn it into gunpowder. One documented case records saltpetre men digging up the floor of a woman's private lavatory while she was in it in labour. Human and animal urine contains urea, which bacteria in the soil and manure break down into nitrate over time. So they weren't interested in taking away your fresh excrement. They wanted soil that had been absorbing human waste for years, and so saltpetre would have crystallized already. Nothing was off the table here. They dug up churches and stables and cellars, anywhere where humans or animals were regularly pissing. They turned it into a cesspit. John Cabry wrote that foul odours emanated from more than 200,000 cesspits across London. They were in alleyways, yards, even the basements of people's homes. This was not a smell that you ever got used to or that could be easily washed away. Saltpetre production was so intensely nauseating that tolerance for the stench was considered the primary job qualification. If you could stand it. Eventually, they weren't getting enough from people's toilets, and so they started to industrialize and created these beds. But you couldn't just leave these beds. They had to be kept wet. They had to be continually soaked in more urine and dung water. Workers stirred mixtures of thoroughly rotted manure of the richest, most pungent kind and then added fresh urine. Ugh. I'm being quite graphic and detailed about this because it's relevant to Bengal and England and also the transatlantic slave trade. This was one of the primary tasks of enslaved labour. This fermentation process took 10 months before it was ready for extraction. And then to process it, you had to boil it, which made the stench even worse. Just taking a pit stop on my way to Bengal in the United States. Let me see if I can get closer. So this is a primary document from Virginia in June 1863. This is a Confederacy payroll for enslaved workers who were tending to these niter beds. But this is not documenting how much each of these people got paid for their work. What was happening here is that the Confederate government was leasing slaves from the slave owners. The workers received nothing, but the state, the taxpayer, was still charged as if every worker had to be individually compensated. These enslaved people, a lot of these are women's names: Bella, Charlotte, Clara, Dina, no surname, no other marker of identity. They were labouring in state facilities like the Ashley Ferry Niter Works and the Charleston Niter Works. They were not paid and they had to literally turn shit all day. I will come back to the slave trade again, but why I'm sharing this now is because it's altering my perspective a little bit. The common narrative about the slave trade is just that it was evil and greedy and corrupt and cruelness was allowed to prevail. And it was cruel and evil and the worst thing that's ever happened. Context point for you. The federal government had an existential requirement for gunpowder. That's not an excuse for this. It's just a fact that gets ignored. The actual government apparatus needed gunpowder and was leasing slaves to do this horrible work. I'm suggesting that that is a massive and obvious driver of the slave trade that we never talk about, the need for gunpowder. The saltpetre men were invasive and hated, and the process was slow and inefficient and toxic. And even doing all of this, the state still could not get enough reliable nitrate to fuel its war machine. Within 2 years of these parliamentary records saying that the common people have had enough of this shit, literally, the East India Trading Company appears. Long before European ships set sail up the Ganges, saltpetre production was already a massive industry in India. It was not that difficult for the British to figure out where they needed to go. The Ganges is one of the richest natural nitrate engines on Earth. Think of the Ganges River as a gigantic, slow compost reactor, a conveyor belt out to the sea. Along the plains in Bihar and Bengal, you have warm, flood-prone soil that stays wet in monsoon and then bakes itself dry after. This is an organic nitrate factory. I'm running out of time, but I will follow up with a pre-colonial India video how the Mughals used to use it too.